jealous of the people I was reporting on, so I decided to get my hands dirty and help implement the Affordable Care Act and got my master's in public health. And I thought I was done with radio, especially, you can't go back to reporting on healthcare after you've worked for Obamacare. You're kind of biased at that point. But what happened was people just started approaching me and asking me to help them make podcasts because of my past working in radio. And it's just such a hot industry. So many people are excited about sharing audio stories in this way that it's grown and grown to the point where most of my clients are podcast clients now. That's why my expertise is a little funny that I'm both talking about podcasts and then helping people sign up for health insurance. So I still do a little bit of health policy type stuff, but Tom and I are getting just a lot of great projects. So it's been fun to get back into audio work. I didn't think I'd be able to come back, so it's been a real thrill to see it come full circle. So that's about me. What we'll do today is just tips for turning your idea into a podcast script. So there are all sorts of different types of podcasts, and the one that is sort of most popular is two people in front of a mic just sort of talking and then you edit it. That's not the kind of podcast work that I do in general. The work that I do is more like the kind of pieces that you hear on NPR. So they're a little more produced, there's a script, there's sound bites. Some of our clients, actually it is an interview, but it's very, it's planned ahead of time. So we do a lot of pre-interviewing. I write the questions ahead of time, and then we edit an hour down into like 20 minutes. So there's a little more work involved. And for those sort of, in front of a microphone type podcasts, you don't need to think about writing for the year because you're already having a conversation. So what I'm going to talk about is if you want sort of a more planned approach to your podcast, how do you make it sound conversational? How do you use your sort of skills as a writer and translate them into language that works for the ear? So I'm going to talk about how. So what's the goal of audio pieces? Like, what do you want to accomplish? What should the writing be like? Anyone? Like, what differentiates a podcast from maybe something you'd read in the newspaper? What would you say? Yeah. Sound? Yeah. And how, when you're hearing words, how is that different? How are you writing differently? Yeah.
Well, first it's great. You won't hear complete sentences necessarily. You might hear quick exchanges, phrases.
Right. So it's not maybe quite as formal. So I just boiled it down to being conversational. You want it to sound natural, the way you would talk to someone, not like the way you would write, a formal report or even a novel. So why? Why do we want it to be conversational? Why do we need to do that for listeners?
Keep the conversation going, just keep it fresh all the time.
Keep it interesting. Yeah. Any other reasons? Yeah.
Maybe depending on the subject matter or the topic, it might make it more like relatable, more like easy for somebody to like get into. Or
They don't tune out, right? Like keep their attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Identifiable.
Identifiable. So like people kind of have a personal connection.
Yeah, they're pulled towards it as a human experience.
Because you're being more personal with them? Oh, that's a really good way to put it. I just said there are technical reasons why. Usually people only listen once. So in a newspaper article, if you don't understand something, you can reread it. With a podcast, you could rewind, but often you're kind of like just going to keep going. So for people to really understand you, you want to make sure they understand you on the first try. And if it's too complicated, they're just going to stop listening or turn it off. They're often doing something else. So you have someone's full attention when you're reading a newspaper, but I know I wash the dishes, I'm folding clothes, maybe you're driving, so you've got divided attention. And you're just processing that information differently. You're listening, you're not reading. And you all had some really great reasons. So now we're going to talk a little more about print versus audio. And I decided to choose a recent news event. Who wants to volunteer to be the New York Times and who wants to be NPR? I'm going to have two people read something. It's short. Okay, who do you want to be? You'll be New York Times. Okay, who wants to be NPR? Somebody. You want to be NPR?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so same story. We're going to have you read what the New York Times headline was and the sort of first paragraph, and we're going to have you read the NPR one, and we'll see how it's different, so we can compare print versus audio. Okay, so New York Times. Can you read that? It's a little off the screen.
It's a little off. Is it
off the screen? There we go. Okay.
Can you see that?
Yeah. Okay. Facing time in prison for her role in the nation's largest college admission scandal, the actress Felicity Huffman grew tearful, her voice breaking as she told a courtroom that she wished that she had never taken part in a scheme to inflate her daughter's SAT score. Earlier, she sat silent and stoic as a prosecutor ticked off all the reasons probation would not be sufficient punishment. In the end, a federal judge in Boston sentenced Ms. Huffman to 14 days in a federal prison on Friday.
Okay.
On the news.
What did you notice about that? What was it like reading it?
It was information, and yet there were a few things that I could play on, like tearful or stoic.
Yeah. Was it easy to read, or was it a mouthful, or
It was a little bit of a mouthful, yeah, absolutely.
Any other observations about the New York Times? Wade? It's well written. I mean, they know how to write, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely like dry. Sufficient punishment's not common. Like you wouldn't likely say that in a conversation.
Like, would you say, like, I think she got sufficient punishment, that Felicity? But written, it makes sense, right? Like, it makes sense. Okay, now you're going to be NPR. Same story.
Okay. Actress Felicity Huffman was sentenced to 14 days in prison on Friday for paying thousands of dollars to have one of her daughter's SAT scores inflated. She is the first parent to be sentenced in the massive college cheating scandal that has rocked the U.S. higher education system.
So what's different about this one? Yeah.
Simple and straight to the point. It's not full like a stuffed turkey. It's not
Yeah.
full of stuff you don't really need. It's
That you don't
straight to
need.
the point and no nonsense really.
Okay, yeah.
And it's not trying to describe the scene or give you a visual of what it was like to be there.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty short. Did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing.
I should note that this is probably from the newscast where they maybe had 30 seconds for this story. And Alex and Anna might talk more about this, but the format of a story is different. So an audio story might want to get you to the courtroom, but they're not going to start that way, right? They want to give you exactly what you need right away, and then maybe they'll take you there with sound later on. But if you're in a newscast, right, you have to just like get straight to the point. They mentioned her sentencing right away. How long did it take to get to the sentencing in the New York Times article? Right? I was like, this is too much text, but we still haven't gotten to the sentencing, so I'm going to have them read that all. So that's just to get you thinking about, you know, the writing in both are great, but they're for different purposes. So how do we do this? How do we make our writing conversational? How do we make it work for radio? I'm going to talk about sort of like a piece that you're planning, you're doing that's involving audio. And the first step, prep work, is probably similar to writing for something else. So you're thinking about, what does your audience know and not know? What do I have to explain? What do I not have to explain? What's the arc or the chapters? Again, with the New York Times article and the NPR story, you know, NPR was really thinking about, what do I need to put first for the listener? And often the order is just as important as the words you use. Like, okay, as someone's building this story in their mind, what do they need to know first? You don't want to bury them with sort of information that doesn't make sense, and then they kind of get lost. And this is talking more about the order. What do you need to know first? And other things. So this is sort of just scoping out your story and really trying to think about your listener. This is a technique I use a lot. When I have a complicated story to tell, I do the research and I kind of do a first draft, and then I practice telling it to other people. And so I think about, okay, what are the questions they're asking when I'm telling this story? When are they interrupting me? What are something I forgot to explain because I'm so deep into this story, and I'm starting at step 3 instead of step 1, and they're losing me? Where do they stop paying attention? Where do they change the subject and want to talk about something else? That's a clue to me when I'm writing my script that, okay, this is where people are tuning out. And where are they leaning in? Like, what is the part that they are just gripped, that they just love hearing? That's telling you, okay, this is an important moment in my story. Now, if you're gonna produce something sort of like an NPR piece, you're gonna want to find great tape. And we're not gonna talk a lot about that right now. But just in general, I think often people think that the tape that they're gathering has to really lay the foundation of the story, but often the best tape is tape that is just really fun or emotional. So your tape doesn't have to say like, maybe your story is about climate change. You don't have to have the science like laying down all the facts, because the scientist probably is bad at explaining it. You're probably faster. But you might want them being emotional or surprising. Maybe you want them to be revealing or personal, because that is pulling people in. So anything that's human. I often have a lot of quotes that someone's like laughing in them. And there's also a technique called butt cuts. That's when it's responsive. So maybe you're interviewing two people on a topic. You interview one person, they say something fun, like, there's no way that I would go to, you could pay me $1 million to live in Texas. And then the next person you interview, you say, well, the guy I talked to said you couldn't pay me $1 million to live in Texas. And then they say, well, I wouldn't want them there, or whatever it is. That's getting tape that's more fun. And then in your piece, you can put that tape right next to each other, so they're having a conversation with each other, and you don't have to even get in the middle of it. We're not going to talk about editing your tape, but there's a workshop on that later. And then I'm going to just talk quickly about a few different approaches. So this is a traditional script for radio, and I think Anna and Alex might talk about this too, but this is where you're just writing out your narration, and you have your sound clip there, and then you have your narration underneath it. I thought that my version had a different example. And that's pretty simple, like you're just reading it and you're playing the clip. And then you kind of have to fake being conversational. You have to write it in a way that's conversational, and then you have to kind of do a little acting and sort of make it sound like you're having a conversation. Another thing I've been trying lately is using an outline. So I create sort of an idea of where the story is going, but I don't do it in full sentences. So as I'm saying it, it sounds more conversational. Sometimes that requires more editing, but it gives it a lot more emotion. So I was gonna show you a script of so let me play you what it sounds like when I use this outline. This story was about, this must be an old version of the presentation. Anyway, this story was about putting insulation into my house and making it more energy efficient. And the question was, there was someone else who had used this air source heat pump. It was expensive, but it was more energy efficient to heat their house. And the question was, would I do that? Like, could I afford to do that in my own house? Because I'm not an environmental scientist who's like that invested in it, and I also don't make that much money. So the conversation was supposed to be, well, is this something that Megan can do? And instead of writing it out, I just sort of gave myself notes. So this is what that sounds like.
Now, is this something that Megan could do, or would this cost a fortune?
So I mentioned it to my husband, I talked to Ryan, and
No, I'm not getting a new heater. Ours is working, we had the iron one, the old-fashioned one, it's fine for me, that's what I grew up on, like, leave it alone.
I also asked our inspector, I described what Stephen had done to his house, and Chip said that he does think that heat pumps are the future, but he wasn't so sure for our house.
Now, is this something that Megan could do, or would this cost a fortune? Now, is this something that Megan?
So hot.
So that was there was very little in that script, but I kind of had an idea in my mind about what I wanted to say, and you can see how the emotion kind of came out, whereas if I had written well, my husband does not like that idea, it would have sounded really different. But instead I was really kind of explaining it to her in the moment. So that is an option for you as well. There's another technique that my friend Bradley Campbell uses called the barf draft. And this is where it's sort of like telling your story to a friend, but you're telling it to an iPhone. So he was on a deadline for a story and had done the interviews 6 months ago and didn't know what kind of tape he had, didn't have time to write a script. So he was like, I'm just gonna tell the story into my phone, and then I'm gonna find sound bites that fit that story that I told. So he just talked into his phone. Then he transcribed that, and then looked for tape to fit it, and then sort of smoothed out the language. And like I said, clean up the narration to fit. So this was a story about OK Go's music video I Won't Let You Down, which is the one where they're like riding on those little bikes and they come out and there's like this giant scene eventually where you kind of zoom out and you see all these umbrellas opening up. Anyway, it was a really beautiful music video if you haven't seen it. And so I'm just gonna play for you his barf script and then what it really sounded like, just a little bit of it to give you a sense of how he did it. Oh, but
Story behind OK Go's latest viral video in some ways starts with a different viral video.
okay, I have to just figure out why iTunes is being weird. I'm gonna close iTunes. Okay, so I'm gonna play you him doing his bar script at the beginning.
Talking to you on the radio,
Oh, no.
because I'm not really
Ah,
talking.
sorry. What is going on? Okay, quiet. Okay. All right, so
All right, this is Bradley Campbell with The World, and we're going to try and do something right now. And we're still recording. Good. Yeah.
he's nervous. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing.
The OK Go viral sensation in some ways starts with a pebble falling down the forest in the middle of Japan. OK Go, a band that originated in Chicago. And then from there has had one viral sensation after the other, each one seemingly getting bigger and more unbelievable than the next. For this one though, they traveled to a different country, Japan.
So that's him just sort of like being like, oh, let me see. And then this is what the beginning of the end product sounded like after he smoothed it out and added music.
I'm Marco Werman with The World. If you know the Chicago band OK Go, you know their first big viral video involved band members dancing on treadmills. Their latest video is a much bigger production. The song is called I Won't Let You Down. The video has already been seen by 11.7 million people. And as The World's Bradley Campbell reports, the band went all the way to Japan to film it.
The story behind OK Go's latest viral video in some ways starts with a different viral video. This one involving a pebble rolling down a giant xylophone ladder. Japanese director Morihiro Hirano shot that video.
And it goes on from there. But like, what do you notice about the barf script and the real, what really happened?
Not at all alike, but there's something very charming about both, you know? I like them.
There was some of the things in the bar script made it to the beginning, but he added that sound and he added, so that kind of got him started. So another option for making your work more conversational is a combination of these techniques. So maybe in your script you use full sentences for important phrases that you need to get right, that you've really thought through, that are sort of more technical. Maybe you have an outline for other parts and a barf script for the first draft. And really it's whatever works for you, but these are just some tools for you to think about. And then these are just a few resources and I'll let everyone else talk. So transom.org is a great resource for conversations about audio storytelling and tools, and it's just a great sort of forum and resource. As you can see, they're shows, they're people that can talk about technology, things to buy. It's been around for a while, and it's where I got my start. My first audio piece I ever made, they put on Transom and wrote me a check for like $50, and I'm so pleased. The Public Radio Exchange is a website where you can post your pieces and sell them and distribute them to stations, and they also have this podcast garage in Boston, outside of Boston, where they have lots of meetups. Trint is my best friend now because it's a transcription service, and when I left the station, I vowed I'd never transcribe again because I was so sick of it. And you load it into the system, a machine transcribes it for you. And if you, there are always some errors, but the nice thing about the format is that you can listen to the audio while you're reading the transcript. And it's searchable. So you can, as you're listening, you can fix the errors. And also if you just want a good sense of what's in your tape, or I don't remember when someone said something, you can just search for the terms, it brings it up, and then you can play and listen to the tape, because sometimes the transcription is different from like how it sounds. Audacity is a free editing software. You can often do what you need in GarageBand, and that comes free with most Macs. And that's it. Any questions?
With the Trent,
Yes.
You submit your sound tape?
You upload your file. So this is, often audio producers transcribe their interviews so they can quickly find the best tape.
Awful.
And it's so much work. So you load the whole file in and it transcribes the whole thing for you.
That's shocking.
And you can pay for, you can pay per.
I'm old.
No, it's
I
great.
just like it.
It's great. You can pay for like a membership. There are different like, but for me it's worth the money.
And there are other websites like it too that do a worse job, but Trim I think is the best. Yeah.
And you can highlight your best parts.
Oh, wow.
It's great.
This is like a big deal. Very freaking big deal.
Good.
And you buy services like a month or a number of pages or something like
It's
that?
per minute. It's like per minute.
Per minute.
Yeah,
It's per
you
hour.
can get a deal if you like buy in bulk or whatever.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah.
Alright, we're done, right?
Yeah.
Just Trim and then
Yeah.
just leave it out.
Yeah. Trent. Yeah. It was worth it just for that.
And we'll have more time for questions.
Yeah, we'll have more time for
Yeah.
questions later. I'll let them guys move on because I took a long time.
So Anna and Alex, do you wanna
Yeah.
either be up here or back